You went to Macomb to study.
Well, now let me see. I started teaching in 1917, 18. Fall of 1918, I believe.
That was your first year?
Yes. 1918.
And what your first job was? Where?
My home school, Prairie Mound, was the name of the old country school.
And that was in Nebo? In the town of Nebo?
And no, it was in, not far from Pittsfield. We lived out in that part of, I never lived in Nebo.
Oh, nearby to Nebo.
But no, I never lived near Nebo.
Oh.
I lived at New Hartford. It's a wayside, sort of a wayside town, about 7 miles south of Pittsfield. And the school was about 2 miles from New Hartford, east of New Hartford.
How many kids did you have?
12. My first school, I had 12.
All grades?
And some of them I'd gone to school with.
Oh. Weren't they doing so well?
And, well, they were younger than me, quite a bit younger.
Oh.
Let's see now. Of course, there were some that was I had one in the first grade, and that first grade youngster learned the multiplication table. Didn't have a whole lot to do, so he learned all of the multiplication table.
Did you teach kids all ages?
Yes,
then?
yes, I taught all the grades.
Up through 8th grade?
And I taught the 8th grade. I taught all 1st to the 8th inclusive. 1st through the 8th inclusive. And I don't remember in that school just exactly, I just don't remember all the grades, but I did have 1st grade. I know I had 1st grade pupils, and I know I had 7th grade pupils. It was quite a school.
Did you board with a family then?
And my folks, I stayed at home until they moved in the spring. I just boarded about a month.
How did you get to school every day? How did you get to school every day?
Walked.
7 miles?
Walked. 2 miles.
2 miles.
2 miles there and 2 miles back. $35 a month. And the last month I went home, I had $1, just $1. I had to pay a board. And when I went home that last month, I had $1. And I gave it to my mother to buy country butter.
To buy fresh butter?
Fresh country butter. And then I worked out, just went to work. I think I worked for several different families that summer.
General working?
Just housework, yes.
And you went back to teaching?
And then I went to Dutch Creek in the fall. That's not far from Rockport. I taught there 3 years in the Dutch Creek 1-room country school. And the second year I was there, a school burned not very far from Dutch Creek. The school building burned down, and children were sent to the nearest schools. And several were sent, 5 or 6 were sent to Dutch Creek to school. And then the next year, they rebuilt that school. It was a modern school. That is everything that they didn't have before. They had the indoor restrooms and water piped in. It was a real nice country school. And they offered me the school, but I had promised to stay at Dutch Creek the 3rd year, so I turned it down. My sister needed a school, so she taught that school.
Which sister was that, Mildred, or?
No, that was Florence. So she taught that school.
At the newer school.
That was this new school, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then because they slipped around and offered me the school again, she wouldn't have it, and I wouldn't have it.
Oh.
So we both left that.
Did kids
we
attend
went to
pretty?
Rockport. Now we both went to Rockport. I guess we took the Rockport school after that.
Mm-hmm. Did kids attend pretty well in those days? Did they show up pretty
Oh
regularly?
yes, yes, we had no problems.
Mm-hmm.
No problems at all. Only you have to spank them once in a while.
Oh, you spanked them, huh?
Oh my, yes. You bet I did. Then in Rockport we had a German professor that was the principal teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't think that was the thing to do.
Oh.
And I was trying to keep him in line one time, going through the door. And I had a yardstick.
Mm-hmm.
And I whacked one. And oh, that was awful. I never had such a lecture. And by the time we got through, he was crying and so was I. And he reached out and we shook hands. Well, I couldn't get along with that school without switch. So I pinned the switch up under my coat and got it upstairs and used it.
Oh, boy.
I better erase the tape.
There was one boy, and he's long since gone to his reward. I have his obituary there.
Oh, that was his reward, huh?
Anyhow, that boy was just, he was paying tuition to come to that school.
In Rockport?
And they needed Rockport.
Uh-huh.
They needed every bit of money they could get, so I was having to put up with that boy. And he did nothing but cause trouble.
Mm-hmm.
He just caused trouble and trouble and trouble. And finally, it came examination time, and final examination papers had to be sent to Pittsfield. We didn't grade them.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't conduct the examination. I think a teacher from another school supervised that final examination, and then those papers were sent to the county superintendent's office to be corrected.
Mm-hmm.
And that boy failed miserably. And another little girl that, and she, on her final examination paper, she wrote opposite questions. I do not know and I do not care. Time and again, that little girl wrote that, and yet her mother expected her to pass. Well, then that's where your father, or your grandfather, put a stop to my teaching. He took me to Pittsfield to see, to look into that, see what I could do about those two. Well, there was nothing I could do.
Mm-hmm.
The papers were there. They were graded. They were final. There was no question about it. They had failed. So I went back to Rockport and reported. And the mother of that little girl was going back to Little Rock to live. She had come from Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, she said, I'm going to take her and put her in high school. So I guess that's what she did. Put her in high school in Little Rock. Well, anyhow,
There were
that's
more.
all there was to it.
There. Did some students go on to high school then in the area or college?
I didn't get you, Jeff.
Would some students go on to high school then after your
Oh,
school?
yes.
And-
Well, there was a 2-year high school in Rockport.
Oh,
So when they finished the 2 years there, then they could go on to Pittsfield, where there was a 4-year high school. Or Pleasant Hill, I think, has always had a 4-year high school. They could either go to Pittsfield or to Pleasant Hill and finish their high school.
How many of your sisters became teachers?
Two. Florence taught school 20 years and gets a good pension.
Oh, and
And the one that died a month or so ago taught 11 years. So, but that wasn't long enough. You had to teach 20 years in order to retire and draw a pension. But you paid into that from 1917, July the 1st, 1917, it became a law that every teacher had to pay into that pension fund.
I see.
And if you, now with me, I never got anything out of it. Of course, it didn't cost much, only about $1 a month, I think, was all we paid in. Then it gradually increased till it was more as time slipped by. But my sister paid in, and finally it was pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But she gets a good pension now. She's retired.
Now, you went up to Macomb for what reason? To add to your own?
Well, it became sort of compulsory that teachers had to have training, more training. And so we had to go in order to continue to teach.
And that was called the normal school
It
in
was
those
a
days?
normal school, yes.
Uh-huh. In other words,
Yes.
a teacher's
Yes,
training
normal
school.
But it's now a university.
Yes.
Mhm.
And how many students were there?
When I went there in 1921, I think,
Uh-huh.
1921, there were 600 students. That
Mhm.
was, and we had to board out wherever we could find a place.
With a family or in a boarding house? or-
Board with a family.
Mhm.
If you were lucky, if you wanted to go, there was one place, Grody Hall, I believe, where students could stay. But that was just about the only place. If you were lucky, get in, that is, early enough, you might get a room
Mhm.
and get to board in the school.
Mhm.
We did eat in the cafeteria, just the noonday meal.
Mhm.
That is the second summer I was there. The first summer I was there, I boarded in the home, had breakfast, and she fixed our lunch. And we had, she would use, oleo wasn't colored back there. You bought it was just like lard.
Oh.
And a little capsule. You
Uh-huh.
had to color it, but she didn't bother to do that.
Mhm.
She'd make us bean sandwiches. And we were paying a pretty good price for board at that time. But bean sandwiches with white oleo on the bread. It wasn't too bad. We got along all right. But that's what she'd do. And some of the boys, they wanted fried potatoes for breakfast, and she wouldn't fry potatoes for breakfast. So they left.
Oh.
They went where they could get fried potatoes.
What courses did you take? What courses did you take at the?
Well, I had history and English. I got my grammar in there that I had in Macomb.
Mhm.
History, English, and geography. And of course I took the writing in spare time.
Mhm.
Now that was the first year. I've got my old card somewhere, Jeff.
Do you have it handy here?
I believe those old cards are in the lockbox.
Your report grade cards or
report
your?
cards
Mm-hmm.
from Macomb.
And then.
I found those the other day. I believe I've got them around here somewhere. I'm not sure just where. But anyhow, that first year I know I took. When I went up there was a man that was a professor at Macomb that I had known when I was in school in grade school. D.P. Hollis
Mm-hmm.
was county superintendent of schools in Pittsfield when I was in school, and he'd visit the country schools, so I knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in his class. Let me see. It was an education course, social education or something, social course, social science or whatever they call it now. Anyhow, he was sitting on his porch one evening, and I was walking by with another friend, and he called me. And he said, "You didn't understand this morning. I felt you didn't understand really what we were talking about." And he had me come up on his porch and sit down and talk to him. And that helped so much. And I just felt sure I wouldn't pass that course. It was difficult. And I was sitting in the study room one day, and he was grading papers, and I'd watch him. He'd frown. "Well, I think he's grading my paper." But you know, I got an A credit on that.
Oh, well.
A minus credit. So I made that one. I never did get anything lower than B minus, I think. I think maybe I got a B minus on one.
What were your favorite subjects yourself?
English and history.
Not so
Like all
much.
normal people.
English
Yeah.
and history.
We think that runs in the family.
It may. Arlene had English and history at Knox. she sort of majored
Mm-hmm.
in English, and then history was a,
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it, a minor?
A
Major
minor,
and
yeah,
minor.
that's right.
Yeah.
That, did you go to Macomb after you were married, or was that
No,
still
no, that was,
before?
no, I didn't go anywhere after I was married.
Grandma. Wow.
No, I thought I was escaping a lot, and I was, Jeff. Grandpa, with all his faults, gave me the security
Mm-hmm.
and the home I never had.
Mm-hmm.
I was having to do the very best I could to live when I was a young woman. And the only thing young women could do out in that neighborhood where I lived was housework or teach school.
Uh-huh. Those
Two things.
the men didn't go in for.
Fortunate enough, and you didn't have to do a whole lot to teach school in those days.
Mm-hmm.
As I said before, 2 years of high school was all that was required. And if you didn't make your examination the first time, an emergency certificate, you could go on and teach because there was
Mhm.
a scarcity of teachers.
And the men didn't go in for teaching too much.
And men, well, after they had to leave the schoolroom to go into the service, they did not come back to the schoolroom.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them didn't, so there was still a scarcity. Well, then there got to be, I thought when your dad was 6 years old, I just had to go back. I had to teach school at any cost. So your grandfather was patient about it, and had more patience with me than I deserved.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all right with him. And I started out the fall that Joe was 6 years old. Got out in the mud, and I talked to directors, and they were against married women teaching, and I went home worn out, glad enough to give it up. So I never did try again.
Mm-hmm.
There was an abundance of teachers at that time, so it was pretty hard for a married woman. And directors told us frankly, we just don't believe in married women teaching school.
Why didn't they?
Well, there was too many young single women that would take the job. But nowadays, well, 95% of the teachers in Quincy are married women.
Do you mean that the single women took priority?
Back there when
because-
Joe's father was 6 years old and I could have gone back to teaching, directors were
But
saying.
was it because they figured that the married women had a means of support
Well,
anyway by the husband? and
They
single
just
women had to
didn't. They
support
thought married
themselves?
women had other means of livelihood. Husbands could take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need a job. That was the
Isn't that nice of them
opinion.
to decide that?
Did you tutor then?
So I did in Pittsfield quite a bit, and I never had a pupil have to take an examination
Mm-hmm.
to go into school. They could go right on.
Mm-hmm.
They had training in the summertime, and I spent hours with some of them. And they could go right on into the next grade. There was the danger, of course, tutoring was to help them to go on instead of staying in the same grade.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing here in Quincy. I tutored a lot of pupils here in Quincy.
In reading.
And you can, and I'll say to this day, you can take a child and sit down with him alone and do more for him than you can in a schoolroom where he's nervous if he's that type of person, or where he just can't get anywhere.
Mm-hmm. You would tutor them in reading and. Or,
Well, anything that they needed.
Uh-huh.
And Quincy Schools paid me a nice piece of money to tutor a friend of ours. That woman, that girl, that picture I showed you of that bride.
Yeah.
She had rheumatic fever
Mm-hmm.
and could not go back to school in the fall. Needed a tutor. And they were scarce. Nowadays, Quincy College sends out young women or young men or both to tutor.
Mm-hmm.
They can get someone to help from the college. But back 30 years ago, no, there was no way. They had to have someone that,
Mm-hmm.
like me, I had my certificate. I kept it for 50 years. And so that one girl, she couldn't go back to school and she needed help, so I went to her home and spent hours with her. Well, she went on in January, then she was able to go back to school, so she went right on
Mm-hmm.
with the year's work, never lost a minute.
Mm-hmm. And you'd had experience teaching on your own. I mean,
Oh, yes.
So you,
yes,
you,
even, yes, in
Mhm.
Pittsfield. I did. Well, then, the last boy I tutored, he came out here, and I helped
to
him.
this house. To this
Yes.
house?
Oh, yes, I had several. I had quite a few.
I remember when I was a kid, I remember one or two coming over,
Yes.
even in
I
my...
had one little girl that was so nervous she just couldn't get anywhere. She was just so nervous in the classroom she just couldn't get anywhere. So I spent a good many hours with her. And then there was a boy that needed a little help just in one subject. And he didn't want anyone to know that he was having extra help. And so he came, and we'd sit here at the table, and I could help him. He just got along all right. So I still think you can take a child if it's nervous and needs a little bit more attention than it gets in the classroom. Sit down with it and help it. I had one other boy that couldn't read, Jeff. That boy couldn't read his own name. That is, understandably. And I taught him, I helped him to learn to read. They needed so badly to learn to read and spell. Reading and spelling are two things that they're sadly lacking. So I taught him, I believe I spent 30 hours with him one summer. Well, he went on, he graduated from high school.
I guess you can't go anywhere if you can't read well, in
Well,
any
no.
subject. I mean, it's...
Well, yes. Isn't mechanical training, vocational training, that sort of thing they don't need
Maybe,
to?
I guess.
Yes. And this boy, well, he would never qualify. He couldn't, well, just lacking something, I don't know what. But I did help him so that he went right on and finished his 8th grade work and went right on to high school.
Was living on the farm a little boring? Did I understand you correctly? You wanted to teach to sort of do something else?
You mean,
Where you grew up?
well, what I said was out in that community, farming community where I lived,
Yeah.
there was only two things that you could do. Either prepare to teach, which was not, as I say, the thing that it is today,
Yeah.
or housework.
Mm-hmm.
That was just the only thing you could do.
Had your
Only two things you could do in that community. There was no such thing as clerking and no chance.
How big was your farm, the Smith farm?
Well, of course, my father was a tenant farmer, and the Shen farms, he worked for 17 years
Mm-hmm.
on the Shen farms. The Shen families, they were quite a prominent Pike-County family.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived on their farms for all that, well, most of my life for that matter.
And the house out there now is that where you grew up in? Where your brothers live now?
No, I never lived there, Jeff.
Oh, I see.
I was married long. As I told you, I think before, my mother, of course, they just moved from one place to another.
Mm-hmm.
And when my grandfather, Rowley, was a Civil War veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and his pension, they never used. They just let it accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
And when he died, of course, my grandmother died first. Then when Grandpa died, there was enough money to divide between, let's see, there was 1, 2, 3, about 4 of them left, that they could each buy a home.
Of your father and his brothers?
My mother's family. So that's, my mother bought that place where the boys live now at Nebo.
Mm-hmm. I see. But you otherwise lived
But I
in
didn't
various...
live there. I was married long before.
Mhm.
Long before my grandfather died.
What was your grandfather Rowley like? Did you know him very well?
Well, he was an Englishman, proud Englishman,
Mm-hmm.
and he was, I guess, just an ordinary sort of a person.
And he'd been in the Civil War?
Yes.
For which side? Which side?
Which side? Of course, he was Lincoln's last call for volunteers from
Oh.
Illinois.
Good, all right.
Lincoln's
I
last
just want to
call
make
for
sure there's no funny
volunteers.
stuff here.
Is this all going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he was born in England?
No, his ancestors weren't English. He was born in this country, but now just where I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's...
William J. Rowley.
And did he work a farm also?
Yes, he had a farm.
Mm-hmm. And then that was your mother's father.
My mother's father.
Okay.
And I never knew my father's mother and father. I just know their names
Mm-hmm.
from what I've heard. As big a set as a person would want.
Okay, now, I just want to get it straight. Who are your mother's, start with your mother's parents and their
Who
names.
were her parents?
Yes.
William J. and Hannah L. Rowley.
And Hannah, Leandra was her maiden name?
Blaine was her maiden name. Blaine. Hannah Leandra Blaine.
And now where was she from?
Now she is, I'm not so sure just where she came from, but she is Canadian, French, and Indian. Evidently her father was, I'm not sure which, Jeff. Canadian, French, and her mother could have been Canadian, French. And the father Indian, I really don't know. And Grandpa's English.
And he was the one who was in the Civil War.
And he was in the Civil War. A Civil War veteran. And his ancestors are back to American Revolutionary times.
Mm-hmm. Did you say he was with Lincoln's last call for volunteers? He was with Lincoln?
He was in Lincoln's last call for volunteers. He was only 19 years old, I think. He was quite young.
And Melvin told us yesterday that he was wounded by a tent pole.
A tent pole fell. I didn't know all that until I heard Melvin talking about it yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know he was so badly hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I know it affected his whole life.
Mm-hmm. He had a steel plate put in his...
And he had a steel plate. I didn't know that.
Put in his skull, according to
Yes.
Melvin. Yeah.
I didn't know that he was that badly hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I should have known it because it did affect his whole life.
How so did it affect his life?
Well, of course, he spent a good part of his life in Jacksonville, in the state hospital.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well...
But that was a result of that injury.
And you knew him pretty well.
Oh, I knew Grandpa, my yes. Years and years went by that he was just fine. They raised a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it's more or less a nervous condition
Mm-hmm.
that causes him to sort of break down.
Mm-hmm.
But then that injury, no doubt, had affected him
Mm-hmm.
all his life.
Mm-hmm. What was he like as a grandpa?
He was just a lovable, good-looking old man, as far as I remember.
Uh-huh.
Always kind and gentle. I never saw my grandfather get the least upset about anything.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hannah Blaine, his wife, Did you know her pretty well?
Oh, yes. I used to stay with her. I loved my grandmother. She was a fine person.
And where did you stay with her?
Well, in their home.
And where was that?
Well, it's in the Black Oak neighborhood. Not far from Pleasant Hill, a few miles from Pleasant Hill. That experience in the hospital, we'd rather not try
Okay.
to...
Go into, yeah.
The last time I saw him, Jeff, his mind was just as clear as mine. But there was just, Grandma was gone, and there was just no one to take care of him. And they told us that there's 1,000 patients in that hospital that are just put there for convenience and left there.
Mm-hmm.
Then, after a while, the state demanded that relatives pay toward the keep of those patients. So probably there's not so much just imposed on them. But
Now,
the last time I saw him, and he was just as free, he could go all over those grounds. And he came to the gate with us, and I said, well, Grandpa, you can just go anywhere. He said, yes, as long as I don't go outside the gate. Just in that smooth, kindly voice, as long as I don't go outside the gate. So he died there, but then it was because there was just no one that to take care of him. And he had good care there, satisfied, could go anywhere he wanted to. So it was more of a nursing home than anything else. More like a nursing home than anything else.
Now, how many children did they have?
They had, did they have 10, I believe, and then that sister, that Aunt Sally that Uncle Ed and Aunt Sally, remember their graves down there? Aunt Sally Grandma was married twice. Her name was Flanders, I believe. And Aunt Sally was Flanders. And then there were 10 children by the second marriage.
And Aunt Sally and Uncle Ed were hers by a previous marriage?
Well, Aunt Sally was her daughter, and Uncle Ed was the husband, Aunt Sally's husband.
By the marriage to Flanders. By a previous marriage?
Aunt Sally was Grandma's daughter by her first marriage, Flanders.
Yeah.
And Uncle Ed was Aunt Sally's husband.
Okay.
Uncle Ed, happy old go-lucky, I thought a lot of him too. We had so many good times together.
Where did he live?
Well, they lived near Pleasant Hill, always lived near Pleasant Hill. Most of them have lived, my father's folks and my mother's, in and around Pleasant Hill.
And what was Uncle Ed's last name?
O'Brien.
Oh, yeah, okay. I remember that from the graveyard. Okay, so they had 10 children, one of whom...
Grandpa and Grandma, there were no children. Uncle Ed and Aunt Sally had no children.
I mean,
But Grandpa and Grandma had 10. I don't know if I can name all of them or not. Wonder if I can. Do you want me to?
Why don't we try?
Well, which was the oldest? Well, I'll just have to name them because I just don't know. There was Fame, Euphemie, Euphemie, I believe is the way that's spelled. And Madeline, M-A-D-A, M-A-D-E, M-A, Madeline. M-A, that's all right. And Warren and Leonard were twins. Now they're all in that cemetery. Those two boys had diphtheria and just died in a short period of time of each other. Warren and Leonard. And let's see now, is that all the girls? Now that's The first two.
Mhm.
And Louisa, I expect we better put her, I think she... Aunt Fay and Madeline were near the same age. And Homer and Lee. And then there's Aunt Lib, Elizabeth. And Lily. And Alvin. I'll count them, Jeff.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 10.
10.
Yes.
That's 10. Well, that's 10.
And Alvin was missing in action.
World War
Mhm.
World War One veteran, yes. Was killed in World War One.
Mhm.
I believe though that family got his government insurance too. I've forgotten. I think after that they weren't in that. I'm pretty sure. And of course, missing in action was all we ever knew, but they were reasonably sure because they did pay the insurance.
Mhm.
Of course, we never heard any more.
Mhm. Did you remember him?
Oh yes.
Mhm.
Yes, he wasn't very much older than me.
Mhm.
We sort of grew up together. He'd come and visit. And Aunt Lily wasn't very old. She wasn't too much older. They're all gone now. There's not one of them living. I guess Aunt Lily was the last one that passed away.
So among those 10 was your mother,
That was
Louisa.
Louisa, Emily.
Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,